Okay, here's the deal with socialism. Now, socialism is not the same thing as communism, despite what the Americans seem to think. Communism would be total government control over the economy. All production, all distribution, everything is by the government. This does not work. It doesn't generate the kind of capital that a society needs. It's extraordinarily inefficient. But my main objection to it is that it assumes that we know enough about economics that we can plan an economy properly, and I don't think we do. I don't think we come even vaguely close to knowing enough. Economics is an incredibly complicated applied psychology exercise, or applied sociology if you want to get wanky about it, and we don't even know 0.1% enough to actually plan an economy. Only capitalism can grow and respond even vaguely fast enough for a modern society. But what is socialism then? If socialism isn't communism, what is it? Well, it's hard to get a really solid definition out of sources like dictionaries or politicos or any of that. So I can only deduce that a functional definition of socialism is some blend of capitalism and communism. That is, the government manages the economy and acts in the economy, but doesn't control the whole thing lock, stock, and barrel. It leaves capitalism to do what capitalism does well, and only intervenes to keep the capitalism going and to protect the people. That is what we've all been living in. Every modern state is socialism, by that definition. We've all lived in a socialist paradise for hundreds of years. There isn't a state in the world that is pure capitalist, because honestly, pure capitalist would mean no state. Pure capitalism is what happens when there is no state, and things devolve to simple supply, demand, and the strong preying on the weak. Pure capitalism doesn't need a government. But any other kind of capitalism requires a government to, for one thing, provide a stable currency, to protect people's life and liberty and property, to build the infrastructure that makes the capitalism more efficient, like roads, railroads, airports, things like that, and dozens of other things that we've learned through trial and error over many, many years we need government to do. See, the problem with capitalism is that it can only do that which is profitable. And there's a lot of things necessary for a modern society which either simply cannot be profitable or which would be far, far less efficient and far, far less effective if it had to be made profitable. See, what the hardcore capitalists don't seem to grasp is that from the point of view of just getting the job done, profit is waste. Say you've got $5,000 and the idea is to use that to help as many people as possible. Having to pay a profit out of that would mean you help less people. So when people talk about privatization of something, you always have to remember privatization only works if the profit-oriented company can do better than the government entity with profit worked into the equation. Often what they do is they actually end up costing more and we get less. It's more expensive because, oddly enough, the people who are keen on competition suddenly become less keen on competition once they have a government monopoly. And the capitalists, the greedy, sociopathic forces of corporate capitalism then have a gun to the people's head, say, well, pay us more, or you won't have whatever, ambulances, hospitals, churches even. That's why some things always have to be done by government. They only can be done by government. And you need the government there. I mean, not even the most hardcore libertarian really admits that what they really are is an anarchist. They always make vague noises about, liking the army and the police, because they don't want people to take their stuff. Oddly enough, their two favorite parts of the government are the two that work most like a fascist state. I mean, you're not a free person in the army while you're in the army. And in most nations, there's this body of, frankly, quite unconstitutional law that applies to soldiers, because that's the only way we could have them be soldiers. They suspend a lot of their rights. And as for police, well, they're pretty much a paramilitary force. I don't have a problem with that, but they are. So if those are your two favorite parts of government, you're really a fascist, really. You're someone who just can't grasp anything more complex than heavily armed men as being part of government. You can't grasp that there's things far more complex and subtle than mere brute force that the government needs to do. A lot of conservatism really boils down to being too stupid to understand complicated ideas, and therefore insisting, shrieking at the top of your voice, that the world is actually much simpler, and that everything really is black and white, because that's the only kind of world you can fucking understand. But I digress. So what is socialism? What's the deal with socialism? You're looking at it. You're living in it. Odds are, if you live in a modern capitalist democracy, you're living in a socialist state. The degree of socialism can be said to vary, with, we'll say, America at the low end and some of the Scandinavian countries at the high end, but we all live in a blend of capitalism and socialism, or communism. That's the problem with letting these insane Americans define the terms. They've defined capitalism in such a constrained way that you can only conclude that the only sane form of government is socialism. If they didn't have such a restrictive and, frankly, moronic concept of how capitalism works, if they were true lovers of capitalism like I am, who understood how complicated and delicate a machine it is, they would not be libertarians. They would understand that capitalism requires government. The only way the grand game of capitalism can work is that if you have the government as referee. The referee doesn't decide who wins or loses, unlike what these twits say. The referee just enforces the rules equally to everybody. And if you break the rules, you should go to jail. Funny how conservatives' love of law and order seems to break down when you start to get to rich people, huh? Almost like it isn't really about law and order. It's just about them being too stupid to do anything but worship power. So basically, socialism is now. If you love your country, and your country is a modern democracy, you love a socialist state. A state that has always been socialist and always will be socialist. So that's what socialism is, folks. It's the country you live in right now, the country you love, the country you grew up in, is a socialist state. At least according to Americans. That's my 2 cents for today. Thanks for listening.